Thank you all so very, very much for coming. My name is Amy St. Peter. I am with the Maricopa Association of Governments. I'll be covering just a few housekeeping details before we get started with a formal program. First, thanks so much to all of you for coming. We really appreciate all of your time today. We would like to thank the Arizona State University College of Law for providing this venue for us. We would also like to thank the Governor's Office for providing a SOP grant which funds all of this great work. Our DV Council for their leadership. I would also like to introduce some of our other friends, including Chief Saul from the City of Maricopa. Thank you so much for joining us. We have wonderful speakers here today, so I think you'll really enjoy the program. Just a few little notes. If you could please turn your cell phones off, that would be wonderful. If you need the facilities, they are just down the hall. And if you didn't receive your parking validation for the Rural Road parking structure, please see Rachel at the table just outside. Without further ado, I'd like to bring to the podium, or invite to the podium, Mayor Laval. He's the chair of our MAG Regional Council, and just a really great supporter of all our events, and you worked really hard to get here today, so thank you so much, Mayor Laval. Thank you. Please help me welcome.
Actually, I was here early. It was the finding a place to park that was ended up being the challenge. I've forgotten how crazy college campuses are. Well, welcome this morning. It's really an honor to be standing here in front of you. As you know, we come together each year and we take a stand against domestic violence. Domestic violence is something that touches probably almost all of us in one way or another, directly or indirectly. I can tell you that I'm personally, as a child, I witnessed domestic violence growing up, and it was an ugly situation. You know, the topic this year is very relevant, even more so than in prior years, because of the publicity that we've seen lately with domestic violence in the sporting venue. I can tell you that the National Sexual Violence Resource Center and the National Domestic Violence Hotline had an 84% increase in calls amidst these high-profile reports of domestic violence in sports. The light that is shining on domestic violence is very bright, and it should be. Domestic violence, as I said earlier, afflicts every community, every demographic, everywhere. This is a national call to action. The tragedy of domestic violence is very much on our minds, on our televisions and in our newspapers right now. We can't waste this opportunity. Sometimes it takes a tragedy, unfortunately, to make something happen. Domestic violence is that tragedy, and the time to do something is now. We're here today in this courtroom to renew our dedication to justice. The theme of this year's event is Voices of Justice. As the mayor of Youngtown and the chair of the MAG Regional Council, my role is to represent my friends, my neighbors, my family, and all of those who call this region their home. I represent the voices of all those people, especially those who do not have a voice. Each year, untold numbers of people are silenced by violence. It's time that we give the attention to domestic violence that it demands. It's time that we hear the voices of the victims and bring their abusers to justice. No one should live their life in fear, particularly not living in fear at what should be their sanctuary of their home. MAG is firmly dedicated to ending domestic violence. On September 24th, just a week or so ago, we passed a resolution unanimously in support of October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. In your materials today, you'll find a copy of that resolution. You'll also find a copy of the 2014 Domestic Violence Awareness Month calendar. There are events happening throughout the region because domestic violence, as I said earlier, affects all of our communities. I encourage you to attend those events and invite others to do the same. You can raise your voice for justice too, just like I am this morning. Speak out when you see domestic violence. Let others know that you will not tolerate this epidemic of violence. Tell victims they are not alone. Teach your children to expect respect and to reach out when they are threatened. Many of you in this room have been doing all this and much, much more for years now. Thank you for all you do to make our communities and our homes safer places. Thank you for being a voice for justice. Now, the next voice we're going to hear is from a woman who had taken steps to protect herself, and that decision may have saved her life.
Yes, I'm calling up from at work, and he's stalking the parking lot. He's supposed to be wanted in Chandler, but they haven't picked him up yet, and he's breaking the order. I have an order of protection. Hello?
Yes, well, thank you. Your name is... Has he already been served?
Yes, he has. It's been a good month now.
Ma'am? Was he in there shooting? Was he in there shooting? Get up right now. Come here. Come on here. Oh my God! Get up. Go out. What are you doing? Come on. Go.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Campbell, and I currently serve as the El Mirage Police Chief in the West Valley and the chair of the MAG Domestic Violence Council, Regional Domestic Violence Council. The recording you just heard is an actual 911 call that took place in the region several years ago. The woman was able to call police when she saw her abuser in the parking lot because she had an order of protection. She did not have to wait until he stormed through the door, firing his weapon. Time in these kinds of circumstances is precious, especially in these dangerous situations, and these in every moment counts. Being in law enforcement for nearly 3 decades, I can personally tell you how dangerous these calls are. We know when we respond to a 911 call, our lives could be on the line just as well. More than half the time when officers are killed responding to calls like this, these officers are ambushed. These are volatile calls with some uncertain and sometimes fatal outcomes. Our job is to keep victims safe and to arrest the abusers. We rely on tools such as the MAG Domestic Violence Misdemeanor Protocol to be able to know the most effective ways to arrest domestic violence abusers, to be able to have the mechanisms and the security of evidence to be able to have a successful prosecution. We've built this model by listening to the experiences from officers on the scenes, as well as prosecutors in the courtroom. We've conducted rigorous analysis of what works and what doesn't work, and have refined our approaches accordingly, as well as working with victims. The value of this process is having a clear and consistent approach built on hard lessons learned from real-life experiences like you've just heard. This means that victims of domestic violence can expect similar service levels no matter where you are in the valley. I want to send a message to all the victims of domestic violence. We hear you, we understand the trauma, and are trying to do our best to try to alleviate this in our community. We hear the fear in your voice when you call 911. We hear the pain when we arrive on the scene. We hear the uncertainty when we arrest your abuser, not knowing what may come next. We hear the cautious relief when your abuser has been convicted and you finally know that you have a place of some safety and peace. We want you to please call us when you have a need, and we will be there. The response to domestic violence doesn't end there at the scene. The next element is our next guest speaker represents the voices in the courtroom and a very strong advocate of family violence, domestic violence, and trying to correct those elements in our homes and safety. Please help me welcome Maricopa County Attorney, Mr. Bill Montgomery, to the podium.
thank you, Chief Campbell, and particularly for your leadership in the region to address domestic violence. And holding abusers accountable wouldn't be possible without law enforcement's brave activities in responding to these calls, which oftentimes represents more danger to responding officers than robbery or other sorts of calls. In the commitment to implementing investigative protocols and supporting the needs of domestic violence victims makes a huge difference too. And I would be grossly remiss if I didn't underscore Mayor LaValle's earlier admonition for teaching our kids to expect respect. And we're talking about voices for justice. Justice only comes after someone's been harmed. And we need to be teaching our young men and our young women that hallmarks and characteristics of healthy relationships for young men do not turn on conquest and dominance and tick marks in your headboard or on your belt. And that for women, if your boyfriend's not going to respect you, they certainly won't when they're a fiancé or when they're a husband. Nonetheless, when it comes time to seek justice, my office is deeply committed to addressing domestic violence issues head-on in the criminal justice system. Our prosecutors work hard to review the evidence and present the best case for a conviction with appropriate sentencing. We know from research and experience that abusers who go unchecked will commit additional acts of violence. They have the opportunity and in their minds the freedom to abuse again. If we're going to break the cycle of domestic violence, we have to punish people for their crimes and take the offending behavior out of the context of what abusers see as an acceptable relationship. Unfortunately, some cases never make it to court. It might be due to a lack of the necessary evidence in order to charge a crime in the first place. And when the victim is involved with the case, the abuser is far more likely to be convicted and receive a sentence that fits the crime. However, some victims never have the opportunity to be involved in their case. Nearly 40% of all murdered women are killed by their domestic violence abuser. 70% of the time, this murder is committed when they try to leave. This makes it critical to do what we can at the first opportunity presented to break the cycle of violence through offender accountability and victim support. Law enforcement has spent this last year scrutinizing our process for opportunities to improve the way offenders are arrested and how we prosecute felony domestic violence cases. In partnership with MAG, we're listening to the community to determine how best to make the criminal justice system responsive and effective. Revisions to the felony domestic violence protocol will help us deliver justice more swiftly and effectively. The voices of the community have been critical to this endeavor. By the end of the year, the felony protocol will reflect what we have heard from you. I want to speak now to all survivors of domestic violence. It is critical for you to know that you have a powerful voice in the courtroom, and it is your constitutional right to be heard. At the time for establishing conditions of release, when any plea is entered, and when any sentence is imposed. Tell us what you need to feel safe and be heard in court at any one of those stages. We need to know if what we are doing is working and what we can do to be better. Share your insights with us. Your voice makes a difference, and we care. We are joined today by Harper, whose voice saved her life and that of her child's. She's here to share her story with you. Please help me welcome Harper to the podium.
Hi, I'm Harper. I'm going to share my story with you. As a child, I was always really strong. Growing up, I was definitely not the type of person you would think could ever become involved in an abusive relationship. My abuser wore a mask. He was one way to me and another way to the outside world. The first time he took his mask off with me, it's because I talked back to him. That night, he beat me in the head with a metal object around my hairline so nobody could see the marks the next day. My head swelled up. The next day, he said things like, look what you made me do. He said things like, it got out of hand. I should have acted right. And for some reason, I stayed. The abuse got much worse over time. The lies I began to tell my family were outlandish. I fell off a moped. I was in a car accident. He did things like leave me in my underwear in the middle of the desert. He held me in his bathroom and wouldn't let me leave for over 24 hours. I drank water from the shower floor. He spit in my face over and over again on numerous occasions. He made me hold my legs over my head in the corner of the room for hours. He once put a loaded gun to my head. And he asked me to write my own suicide note. Unless you go through something like this, I don't know if you can comprehend fearing for your life. The thoughts that went through my head at that time were, I'm never gonna see my son again. I was so sure I would never see my son again. But I did. He would bang my head against tables to get passwords for my Facebook account, my email accounts. He took control of my bank accounts. He often choked me. He filmed me, recorded me, followed me. I was thrown from a moving car. One time I jumped from a moving car. The police were called many times, and I never pressed charges. The police showed up one time after he threw me from a car, and I ran to a gas station where he followed me, and the police showed up, and I was covered in blood, shirt ripped, road rash all down my leg, and my abuser had followed me to the gas station and said, she's not gonna press charges, just ask her, she's not. And he was right. I didn't press charges, and I left with him that night. I couldn't find my voice. I share the things that he did to me in hopes that if somebody else is experiencing these things, this is severe abuse, and it's never gonna get better. I wish I could say that my son never saw any of this, but that's a lie. At 5 years old, he saw me get hit numerous times. A little 5-year-old boy trying to push a 240-pound man off of his mother and screaming, please get off my mommy. I can actually feel him tugging on my shirt and begging me to leave, begging. If we could just go to grandma's, we'd be okay. And I told him we would, and I never did. I lied to him over and over again. At the most, I'd leave for 1 or 2 days. I saw my son throw up out of fear. He threw up his own food because he was so scared at home. My child saw terrible things that no child should see. No matter how bad the physical pain was, the mental pain did just as much damage. I was told over and over that my family didn't love me. I was worthless. Soon I began to doubt my self-worth. I was worthless. He isolated me from my friends and family. He told me things like I was crazy, I was mentally ill. I deserved it. Nobody would believe me. He would take my phone and go through it. He'd break it over and over again. Full control of my bank account. It was for my own good because I couldn't manage my money. One night he took pictures of my face after he tried to suffocate me, and I had pried his hand off of my mouth to catch little breaths throughout the night because it went on for hours, and scratched my face. So my face was pretty grotesque looking. He took pictures of it, posted it on the internet, and said, "Don't do drugs," across the picture. Shaming me. And he posted that picture online. When I left for the last time, I had planned it. I was going to leave when he was gone. He had video cameras around his house, and he would record me without me knowing. I packed up all of my son's stuff. My son was out of town, fortunately. Packed up all of my son's stuff, so if for some reason he came home, at least my son would have his toys. And he did come home when I was in the middle of leaving, so I ended up leaving with nothing. No clothes, none of my jewelry, not my computer, nothing, but I left with my life that day. He followed me in the car as I took off, and he used his car against my car as a weapon, which he had done numerous times. Eventually I lost him, and I made it out. I didn't press charges that time. I didn't call the police. In fact, I still responded to text messages and phone calls. I hadn't seen him, but I was responding. The night he tried to kill me, I was asleep in my mom's house, and he broke in. I awoke to him strangling me. You see, he thought nobody was home that night. But my brother had caught a ride home with a friend, and his car wasn't there. He heard me screaming, and he called 911. He left before the police got there. But when the police officer got there, it was different. He was kind. He was kind to me. The officer was compassionate. He sat with me as I cried. He didn't think I wasn't going to press charges. He explained to me how important it was to press charges. How he couldn't do anything unless I pressed charges. He made me feel safe, and he was kind, and I pressed charges. He also explained to me that I should go to the forensic nurse, because if I changed my mind later, like a lot of victims do, at least they would have documentation of my injuries. So I did that. He drove me there, and he stayed with me until I got to the nurse. This was hours. Even as I was pressing charges, I had those thoughts in my head of protecting my abuser. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm pressing charges. He's going to go to prison. He's going to lose his job. He'll lose his house. He won't be able to take care of his family. These were thoughts that were going through my head, that had always gone through my head when it got to this point. I just didn't listen to him this time. I think that that has a lot to do with how the officer treated me that night. He helped me find my voice for the first time. I followed through the entire court process. I was assigned a victim's advocate who was in constant contact with me. She constantly met my needs and made sure I knew everything that was going on with the court proceedings. I reported everything, every contact I received from him, whether it was a text message, whether it was an email, whether I thought he might have drove by my house or my car got broken into. Every incident I reported. Because even though an abuser might tell you that they think a restraining order is just a little piece of paper, that's not what it is. It's a tool. It establishes a pattern of abuse, and it provides documentation of that abuse and a disrespect for the court. So I reported everything. I even reported the text saying, I just want to give you your baby pictures of your son back, because I left everything. And the money your grandmother left you. I ignored that and reported it. He always said he wasn't scared of the police, but that's a lie. He told himself he was scared of the police. You see, the farther I distanced myself, the easier it got. I had a team behind me now. It wasn't just me. It was the officer. It was the victim's advocate. It was the prosecutor, who also constantly made himself available to me. Met with me, gave me his cell phone number, and I was able to contact him if I had any concerns. The victim's advocate taught me a lot about domestic violence. I learned that the things that I went through were classic signs. There were signs early on I failed to recognize. The prosecutor fought for me. He fought against the ridiculous excuses my ex came up with in the courtroom. He fought to have my attacker convicted. They were all on my side. It wasn't just another case. I never felt that way. I used my voice, and they were the team that held a microphone to it. I want any person who may hear this who's feeling trapped or has lost hope or thinks it will get better or keeps protecting their abuser like I did over and over, that it won't. It will get worse. You quite possibly can die. You are not alone. I am here representing all victims. I am a survivor. It's our responsibility to use our voice. It's our responsibility to use our voice. Please, use your voice. I think about what might have happened if a different officer responded that night. I honestly believe I would be dead, and my son would be motherless. I think that officer saved 2 lives that day. I went to therapy. I healed the broken relationship with my son. He believes me again. It took a lot of work, but he believes me again. He knows we'll never go back, and he knows I'll protect him. See, he was a grown-up for a couple years, and he never should have been a grown-up. He's a sweet kid who plays outside, and he has a normal kid life now. He won't grow up in a violent home. He won't grow up and be violent against women, and he won't end up in prison. He won't be violent against anybody. I share these examples of what happened to me behind closed doors in hopes that more of us will open these doors and free ourselves and free our families. I want to say something really quickly to the abused. What we don't realize is our silence encourages our abusers. Our silence encourages the abuse. It never helps us. It is nearly impossible to realize that in the midst of the relationship. We think our silence protects us from more pain, whether physical or mental, but that can never be true. What we are most afraid of will set us free. I could never have pictured my life as it is today back then. My life is amazing today. To friends and families of people that are being abused, or if you suspect abuse, reach out. If someone tells you they're being abused, believe them. If they're telling you, I guarantee you, they're just telling you the tip of the iceberg. It's much, much worse. And please call the police at every opportunity you get. This is very important. I don't care if it's your sister, your daughter on your doorstep, or your neighbor. If you think abuse has taken place or is taking place, call the police. Because every time the police are called, it's another chance for us to find our voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Harper, for sharing your story, your pain, your strength with us. Your ordeal was unimaginable, and your courage is inspiring. We have much to learn from both. My name is Sandra Renteria, Assistant Chief with the City of Phoenix Police Department. I stand before you as a 20-year veteran in the police force, including time in family investigations. I also stand here as a woman, a neighbor, a daughter, an aunt of 2 teenage girls. Harper's story touches me on many levels. Like you, I feel shock, sadness, anger when I hear about experiences like this. For more than 2 decades, I have been fighting to keep our neighborhoods safe. After more than 2 decades, I can tell you how often violence like this occurs. Frequently, after hearing about domestic violence, people ask, why does the victim stay? Isn't the more important question, why does the abuser commit acts of violence? What exists within a person that motivates them to control and terrorize another person? What is it in our society that condones domestic violence? I don't know why domestic violence exists, but I do know it's absolutely unacceptable. Harper survived what no person should have to endure. When we hear about the pain inflicted by domestic violence, we can feel helpless too. What can we do to stop domestic violence? We can do what Harper did. Say something. When you witness a crime, call the police. When someone shares their pain with you, tell them they're not alone. When you see someone being mistreated or belittled, step in. Every time we accept or overlook controlling or violent behavior, we are validating abuse. The motto of the Phoenix Police Department is to ensure the safety and security for each person in our community. We cannot do this while domestic violence continues to ravage our homes. We are partnering with the MAG Regional Domestic Violence Council to improve the way abusers are held accountable. The Phoenix Police Department is fully committed to seeing justice is done. We need the total cooperation of the criminal justice system to do this. There will be many challenges, and we are prepared to face those challenges. Coordination and communication are essential and essential ingredients in this work. We are using our voices to make changes that will save lives. I would like to invite Vice Mayor Robin Barker to the podium now. She is the Vice Chair of the MAG Regional Domestic Violence Council and a partner in this work. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Chief. We value your partnership and are thankful to all of the people here that are with us in the pursuit to end domestic violence. Harper, you are my hero. I am in absolute awe of your courage and your fortitude. You had the fortitude to get out of a horrendous experience and the courage to speak out, to give a voice to the victims of domestic violence. Thank you very much. What we've heard here this morning is the willingness of the criminal justice system and their agencies to listen. And we're encouraging domestic violence survivors to use their voices to be safe and to find justice. I'm inviting everyone here to continue to speak out against domestic violence. We cannot remain silent in the face of such terrible injustice. The most important voice in this discussion about domestic violence is the survivors. All too often, women, men, children, They suffer from abuse in silence, behind closed doors. Today we want to break that silence to say you are not alone. We are here and we are listening. The MAG Regional Domestic Violence Council wants to hear from you. This month we are launching a region-wide survey about victims' experiences with the criminal justice system. We will be reaching out and to ask, where has the system helped you? And we'll use this information to change how we address, how we arrest and prosecute domestic violence offenders. But the conversation does not end today. All month, a variety of activities are planned to raise awareness of domestic violence in the hope that we can keep people safe. And I encourage all of you, I challenge each and every person here to listen, to reach out, and to use your voice for justice, not just during this Domestic Violence Awareness Month, but every single month of the year. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming here today and for everything that you all do to break the silence. Thank you.